All right. You're watching OTB AM. It's 9:15 on this Friday morning. It's the moment you've all been waiting for. We're going to select County Down's Mount Rushmore, and to do it, two proud sons of Down are waiting on the line. Conor Deegan and Donal O'Neill. Good morning to you, lads.
Good morning, fellas.
Sleep well?
No.
We better get straight into it. We've had Colin Murray. I don't know if either of you managed to catch him on the show a bit earlier on, and he's made an impassioned plea for four people, but very much of the view that George Best and Rory McIlroy were bankers. Conor, you're our lead selector here. Lead us off.
Yeah, well, it was horrendous. I was sorry that I said I would do it when I started delving. when I started delving into it, and you realise just the extent and the depth with which you could do it. I could happily and easily put in 4 Gaelic men or women, quite easily, without a problem. But in the interest of some sort of balance, I tried to sort of spread it out a wee bit further. I watched Colin earlier on, and for me, quite simply, I think McIlroy's an absolute shoe-in. 4 major wins. You know what he has done in his entire career has been outstanding.
Conor, what's the view of him up there? Because look, I think you're right, and there's no great amount of time to spend debating whether he should be on it, and that's the start. What's the the way there is a perception of him certainly down here that he's, some people love him, some people loathe him. What's the perception of the guy?
Sport-wise, yes, absolute guarantee. I think that the big issue is he loved. Not like Harrington would be loved in Dublin, or in his way that he.
Why is that?
I suppose he got embroiled with the crap that we have to deal with in the north. The politics, people look at it green or orange. I mean, it's just there's so much crap involved with it. If you take it outside, this kid grew up in front of us. He's now 31. He's not a kid. He's a man. But he did all his growing in front of us. He was a superstar from early on. He was touted as being a superstar, and he had to do all of that in the confines of a very, very difficult bubble. No matter what he said, it was going to be scrutinised, and it was. Some of the things he said, you would question why he said them. That's another aspect of it. But I think he's hugely respected, but I don't think he's loved to the same degree. Although, I find that, personally speaking, I think that's wrong. I think that in many ways he's, his talent is unquestioned. I would know his coach reasonably well, and, everything about them is so down to earth and basic. I think he actually wants to be just an ordinary punter, an ordinary guy, but unfortunately, his skill sets and the world that he lives in and moves in doesn't allow him to be that. I think he would happily run about and play as he done and hurt his ankle and play his football and mess about. And I think that's really where his biggest issue is. The other side of it now, he's in America. He's now away from this part of the world. But in many ways, it's and like he's done tremendous things here. He's the Sunshine Charity up in Newcastle for the kids with cancer. He has put money where his mouth was as well. So in many ways you'd have to look at the bigger picture and say I think he's done very well. I think he's stayed reasonably balanced. It's perception. It's what we look at and it's what we expect. We want him to stand up and say certain things because from our side of the divide, that's what you want to call it. You want him to say certain things, and if he doesn't say it the way you want it, then you're against him, and it's nonsense, really, when all said and done.
Yeah, like he should, Donal. He wasn't even 10 when the Good Friday Agreement was signed. He, in so many ways, should embody everything that's brilliant about the North. And it is interesting to hear that he still divides opinion.
I don't think he divides sporting opinion, and what I've tried to do in bringing my list together here is just put the bias aside. I have similar biases to Conor, GAA and all of that. But I think when you're talking sport and performance and how high up the mountain have they got. And McIlroy's at the top, end of story.
Yeah, there's no arguing that's for sure, Donal. We might get stuck into what way this mountain is going to look. So earlier on, Colin had George Best and Rory McIlroy, 2 absolute guarantees. So the two of you are putting down Rory McIlroy, I assume, as your number 1. Like, if we go in order of your preference, who is your number 2 down sports person, Conor?
Mine would be, it's a Gaelic man. As I said, I could have filled this with many great Gaelic people. But for me, and I'm probably not going to get an awful lot of kickback from Donal. For me, Sean O'Neill would be brought into the reckoning. I think his longevity, the class with which he played, carried himself, the passion. He played for Mitchell's Queens down in Ulster. It's only when you start seeing or listening to what he achieved. He had 3 All-Irelands, 6 All-Stars. Well, two All-Stars as we know them, and 4 Cuchulainn Awards previous, 4 McKenna Cups, 5 Lagan Cups, 8 Ulster titles, and he played in 15 finals, which I just find mind-blowing. 8 Railway Cups, 3 National Leagues, Texaco Footballer of the Year, and he just happened to make Team of the Century and Team of the Millennium. It's as a player, I think he scored 85 goals and 500 plus points in his career. I just think from a playing point of view, it's unparalleled. I would have thought I was certainly up in this neck of the woods. As a man, his passion for his county, for his people, absolutely phenomenal. You speak to Sean O'Neill and you're the only person in the room, you're the only person at the side of the pitch. He just embraces you and talks to you directly, and his desire and love for the game is just absolutely phenomenal, so as I said, I could have put so many in there: Maurice Hayes, Kevin Musson, Mickey Linden, so many fellas that Colin McIlroy, I could list them for God's sake. But
what sort of a player was he, Conor? Is that, I don't know if it's a fair question to ask Donal, but
it's a difficult question in many ways. I mean, Sean O'Neill played. When he finished, I think 4 or 5 or whatever. But his playing ability, very, very quick, thoughtful. The way he thought about football, very, very sharp, very tenacious, aggressive. Very, there was no skullduggery. It was very, very clean, very single-minded, driven. But his skill sets obviously were on a par with absolutely anything else that was going on. And he played in the forward line. That early 60s team, I mean, from our county, nothing touches it. To compete in 15 finals in 16 years, which Sean did, or whatever, I think there was 2 years that he missed out, would have been 69 and 72. Other than that, he played in every final. I just think, we talk about teams now getting to 5, 6, 7, 8 finals. He did 15, won 8. I think that's a remarkable achievement in anybody's book. But just how he carries himself, and I would put Sean O'Neill forward as a representative of the GA if that's how we want to look at it, purely because I just think I just think what he's done. And you have other guys, you've 4 guys won 3 All-Irelands, of which he's won. I think you've Dan McCartan, Paddy Doherty, and Joe Lennon were the only others. So they're the 4 guys that have 3 All-Irelands in this neck of the woods. So, and you just have to talk to the man. He's 82 now, and he talks to you with the same verve and passion that he would have had when he was playing. So, a great guy to be around. I have to say, I'm obviously very fond of the man. But he doesn't suffer fools lightly, and he'll tell you if you've made a mistake. He'll talk to you. He'll put it to you in very blunt terms. And when Sean speaks, you listen. So for me, as a representative of the GAA side of it, for me, Sean O'Neill. Maurice Hayes would have been very close. Kevin Musson would have been very close. Mickey Linden, I would be very biased towards Mickey, obviously. Again, but they're loved. I think that's something that comes out of this. I mean, Mickey Linden's absolutely idolised up here, rightly so. Sean O'Neill would be the same. Kevin Musson the same. There's so many. Pete McGrath, DJ, Paddy, captains. Kevin Musson was the first man to carry the trophy across the border. That's a huge thing up here. It's a seminal moment of GAA folklore up here was Kevin and I believe got off the bus and walked across the border. That's huge. So if we're looking at firsts, I think maybe Kevin's been maybe hard done by, but you have to make a call on it. That's my call.
Donal, that's your uncle that's going up.
Yes, and as I said, I had to put my own bias aside, and Sean's an obvious pick if you're going with a GA personality, and he is a wonderful man. One of my favourite quotes was after I scored a very fluky goal in an Ulster semi-final, a minor semi-final championship against Clonduff up at Casement Park. I was under 16 at the time, so I was just a kid running around in the corner. The ball came off the crossbar, found its way off the back of my left knee into the corner of the net somehow, and it won us the game. And Sean said to me afterwards, "Donal, that was not a pretty performance, but damned effective." And that's Sean. He always had a good word, but he was and is a legend. He's a wonderful person, but I didn't put him on my list because obviously I'm a family member, and I knew Conor would bring something GAA to the table. But I looked at this from the context of who has taken things beyond the borders of Ireland, and who's really risen above a system that wasn't really supporting them. So you mentioned Joe Lennon there, Conor. Obviously another great stalwart of Down GAA, but Joe's nephew is actually one of the persons on my list, and that's Dermot Lennon. Dermot won the 2002 World Show Jumping Championships, and he was paraded at half-time in Croke Park the day Armagh won. He came out at half-time, and they made the reference to Joe and whatnot, and he got a big round of applause. But that achievement was never really acknowledged. Dermot's a very calm, laid-back individual. He's not somebody who seeks the limelight. But what he achieved, and I saw it firsthand, the respect that there was for him in the world equestrian community, because I managed him for a short while. And to a man and a woman, anybody I met, I didn't really know the sport. They said there's no doubt that Dermot Lennon is the best jockey in the world right now. And to win that title, he was on a horse called Liscalgo. And Dermot didn't come from money, so he wasn't buying the big horses. He had one great horse, and he had one phenomenal day. But it wasn't because of his horse, because the format required you to ride the other riders' horses as well. You were given 2 minutes to familiarise yourself with your opponent's horse. There were 4 in total. And you then had to ride that horse. So it was regarded as one of the purest forms of a sporting contest that you could get. It's like Formula One drivers driving each other's car. You don't see it. And I didn't know that. So if I'm putting my biases aside, I would introduce Dermot Lennon as a candidate for this list on that basis. Okay. A quiet, unspoken hero, but a world champion.
For people who are just tuning into Mount Rushmore for the first time, Conor's going to put forward his 4, and then Donal is going to have the opportunity to swipe one of those out there. You can reach some consensus maybe on who that would be, and then obviously, Donal, you get to decide which one you are putting up there. So on the ones that our Chisler has begun to get stuck into, we've Rory is up there, and Sean O'Neill is up there so far. Our lead adjudicator, where are you going next?
And unlike what Collie said earlier on, I'm not on drugs, and I don't need to be drug tested. I know he wanted George Best, and I left George Best out. People
Why?
Were saying, why? Because I knew somebody else would bring him in, if I'm being honest. And for a long time, I have to be blunt, I didn't realise he was a down man either.
Right.
Yeah.
So he, and Collie articulated very well, Craigie Road, my part of the world is I'm from a Gaelic background. There's not much Gaelic played in the Craigie Road. I wasn't aware that he was a down man until we started doing a bit of digging, and then you have to go onto Google Maps and you're starting to work everything backwards as a player. But he's not on mine. I'm sure somebody else will bring it in.
Well, can we just establish right before we leave here then? So he's not on yours, but you're doing that on the assumption that he is going to be up there. So, are we deciding collectively here that we're not leaving this list unless George Best is on the mountain?
We've got absolutely played by Conor Deegan here. He knows exactly how the format works, and he knows that there can be one alteration made to his Mount Rushmore, and that will have to be George Best. So you've played us perfectly here, Conor.
It's all a political game, boys. We're very political up this neck of the woods. You better know that at this stage.
We better get Donal in, though. We better get Donal's thoughts on George Best.
I have to confess, I'm with Conor. There are a lot of elastic borders between Down, Armagh, Antrim and whatnot, and it's hard to know where they begin and end. So I wasn't 100% sure if Best was from Down. I just assumed Belfast, and I didn't want to go there, and I thought Conor would have him. So this is a bit of game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. I thought Conor would have had him, so I didn't. I mean, Pat Jennings is the legend from Newry that we would have grown up with. But I think if George is absolutely a Down man, then he's absolutely on my list, because if Pele said he was the greatest, what are we doing here debating whether he was or he wasn't?
I'm beginning my temperature's beginning to lower with that comment, Donald. So good. Right, and on that basis, we'll come back to it before. We've about 8 minutes to get through this, so we will come back to that before we wrap. But where are you taking us next, Conor?
I'm taking to a wee lassie from Portaferry, a young lassie called Ciara McGeehan. It's only, again, when you start doing a little bit of digging, you realise just what this young girl has done. She went away, she raced Euro Juniors, silver medal, World Juniors, silver medal, World Youths, silver medal, Euro indoors, 1500 metre, bronze medal, European Championship, 1500 metres, bronze medal. I mean, this lassie, coming from Portaferry, she wouldn't have any tracks that neck of the woods. There's nothing to help her other than her own desires. It's a hugely individualised sport. She comes across brilliantly, obviously. She's what she's done in the running world, I believe, is absolutely superb. To be competing at world and European levels is just incredible. Considering she's gone up against an awful lot of runners, the East Africans, massive amount. I think in her World Championship, the World Juniors, she was the non-East African athlete who won a medal. She won a silver medal. I think to come from her background, camogie player, it's not as if she was grown up and nurtured for stardom in the athletics track. She wasn't. So she's come from her dad, Hunter, big hurling man for Down as well. She just has that drive from within, and to be able to push herself on an individual basis in a sport like that. Now, she spoke very heavily out against the drug element potentially and the doping element of it as well. Like, she ran a time that she hasn't broken the 4-minute barrier, which she really wants to do. She's just over a second behind Sonia O'Sullivan's all-time record. The time that she ran in I think it was the Europeans, she would have won a gold medal in 7 out of the previous 8 meetings with her time. But how things have developed, I think the winner of that was coached by Mr. Salazar and things of that nature. So a lot of questions over this. I just think as how she's carried herself, what she's done, absolutely superb.
Okay, that's Rory, Sean O'Neill and Ciara McGeehan. Who's your fourth pick?
I went for big Newry man, Pat Jennings. Any number, Danny Blanchflower. I was okay because my dad's a Spurs man, so Danny Blanchflower, Pat Jennings, I was sort of covering bases there. Pat Jennings, his career is phenomenal. As Donald said, he's been outstanding and one of the great men that we grew up looking at and watching. He played. I think he only took up soccer really when he was 16 or so. They put him in nets for Newry Town. I think as Collie alluded to, they lost all their goalkeepers. They got this kid in. He did nets. He just happened to be very good at it. He went to Spurs for 27 grand in 1964. Played for 13 years, 591 appearances. He's won an FA Cup, 2 League Cups and a UEFA Cup with Spurs. Then they reckon he was too old and they sold him to Arsenal, where he went to Arsenal and played for 8 more years. Again, winning an FA Cup and a Cup Winners' Cup. He had 327 appearances. First man in English football to have over 1,000 appearances. He was Footballer of the Year for the Writers Association, PFA Player of the Year as well. He's held in such high esteem. He was without doubt, he was without doubt one of the top 2-3 goalkeepers on the planet. played in 6 World Cup campaigns. His final match was in the 86. He was 41 years of age, and his final match was in a World Cup finals. A more humble, decent human being you will never meet. Possibly the worst hairstyle in Europe, which is saying something coming from myself, who I'm sort of follically challenged. But as a man, I met him actually not that long ago, I suppose about a year ago, and just, he hasn't changed. He's just the guy from Newry. Yeah. Who's done very well and has time for everybody. And look, when you look at what he's done, superb. Very hard to go against him. But, well, somebody's going to lose out somewhere.
Yeah, and look, I know, Donal, you're in agreement with Pat Jennings. You've Rory up there, as you mentioned. You mentioned Dermot Lennon. Give us your fourth and let us know exactly what we're dealing with now.
I'll give you my fourth in a second, but I'm delighted Conor brought in an athlete, because when Tommy called me the other day, I said, I bet you haven't got some remarkable track and field athletes on this list who should be. And I was a senior international athlete for a blink of an eye. Terry McHugh was captain of that squad. Terry McHugh, born in Clonmel, couldn't hurl. That's why people never heard of him. Made 6 Olympics, 4 Summer Olympics, 2 Winter Olympics, 21 consecutive javelin titles, world-class athlete, an absolute monster. The first time I saw him was down in Santry Stadium. I walked onto the high jump fan. I was 16 years old. There's this bloke, 6'4", 110 kilos, knocking out the javelin with handstand push-ups in between, and this was long before CrossFit, boys. Remarkable athlete. And to make a toboggan Olympics, I can't tell you how phenomenal achievement that is. You've got Adrian O'Dwyer down in Kilkenny, who was the first Irish athlete ever to be ranked indoor. He jumped 2 meters 30. He was second in the world to Kobe Bryant in the vertical leap stats. Kobe did 121, Adrian did 120. Nobody's heard of Adrian O'Dwyer. Remarkable world-class athlete who had a brief career, but a very brilliant career. And Maeve Kyle, my coach, Adrian's coach, first woman to compete for Ireland in the Olympics in 1956, captained the Irish hockey team, took up athletics at 27, made 3 Olympic Games. So there's a lot of bias out there, so I'm delighted Ciara McGeehan's on Conor's list. On mine, I've got Norman Brown. In 1982, I was nominated alongside my cousin, wee James McCartan, for the Junior Sports Personality Awards in Newry and Mourne, which was a small little event in the town hall. I think Norman Brown won it that year. Norman had won the TT, the Isle of Man TT, on his debut race. He was very sadly killed at the British GP the following year in Silverstone. And Northern Ireland is a it's a petrolhead centric part of the world. A lot of people don't realise that if you're not in it. But I went to the MotoGP in Italy last year just to see what it was like, and it gave me a whole new respect for these racers. And in fact, Steve Hislop, who went on to win the TT 11 times, said that Norman Brown was the greatest racer he ever saw. And if Norman hadn't been taken away so tragically, he would have wiped myself and Joey Dunlop into the weeds, quote unquote. So a remarkable talent who had burst onto the world stage and then disappeared, and people have obviously forgotten about him. So Norman Brown made my list for that reason, and he is from Newry originally, my hometown.
Okay, right. So we've a fairly stellar list of 8, and just to recap it for people, and we've a little bit of extra time here. Conor's gone for Rory McIlroy, Sean O'Neill, Ciara McGeehan and Pat Jennings. And Donal, you've mentioned Norman Brown there, Dermot Lennon a bit earlier, and also Pat Jennings and Rory as well. Now, the name that's absent, and we're going to have to find a way of getting him on here, whichever one he is going to have to give, I don't know. But how are we making room for George Best?
No idea. Over to you, Donal. You're the one meant to take one out.
Mine was a geographical error, so I would... I remember going to meet Pat Jennings, who was a great friend of my uncle's, and I actually hid under a mattress in the garden. I was literally shaking in my boots with the prospect of meeting this giant of a man. See, there's no argument that Pat is a remarkable person, a phenomenal sportsman. But I remember watching a show where they put Kevin Keegan up against George Best, and the vote came down 10-1 in Keegan's favour because he was a team player and he was this and he was that. But I'm sorry. If Pele says he's number one, he's number one. So anything else is a waste of breath. And I was just unsure about the geography, so that feels on me. Otherwise, he would have been on my list.
Yeah,
I think one of the biggest issues we have, it's the numbers, it's the people. You have Eddie Irvine,
Yeah.
You know, second in the World Championship, 4 Grand Prix wins, 28 podiums. You know, phenomenal stuff. You know, wee lassie who's lives very close to myself, Bethany Firth, Paralympian, 4-time Olympic gold medalist in the 1 and 200 meters swimming. You know, obviously she comes into the reckoning. To do that, she swam for Ireland first, and then obviously the sort of the British realised she was very good, so they took her across to swim for them. There's a few, like Philip Matthews, rugby, from Ballywalter, played for Queen's, George Wander, Ulster, Ireland. I think he also played in the Lions. Phenomenal. Danny Blanchflower, spoken about, unbelievable. There's a wee man named a boxer, Jimmy McLarnon. Nobody knows of Jimmy McLarnon because he was born in 1907.
You're avoiding the issue here, Conor.
No. You're the one who has to make the call. I'm okay.
Richard Dunwoody, nobody's mentioned.
Richard Dunwoody, 3-time champion, 5-time jump jockey. He was of the year, over 1,800 winners. I'm not a big horsey fan. I'm not a fan. I don't know enough about it to argue, but he was 3-time jump jockey. There's learned friends of mine who are horsey people, and they said, like, he wasn't given all the top rights. So for him to do what he did was absolutely off the scale. No Connolly, he put him forward as his choice, or one of his choices.
He did, yeah.
When you start looking at them sort of things, but for me, the best thing is sitting there. That's the problem.
Are you saying with your 4 now? Donal is right. We need to pin you to it here. Are you saying with your 4 you're not moving?
I have my 4. Somebody has to take one out. And it's not me has to take one out. It's Donal has to take one out. Is that not how this is?
I'm going to have to trade Big Pat. I'm going to have to put Best in there. I'm sorry.
So you're putting George Best in as of your own volition, so rather than one of the other ones you've mentioned. So that changes things considerably. So George Best in for Pat Jennings, which means we're currently sitting on a Mount Rushmore of Rory McIlroy, Sean O'Neill, Ciara McGeehan, and George Best.
Oh, apologies. I was thinking within sporting codes. I would trade Ciara McGeehan, unfortunately,
for George Best and keep Pat Jennings on the mountain.
Yes.
I see. Right. So that's so just to recap that then, it's Rory McIlroy, Sean O'Neill, Pat Jennings, and George Best, which is where we're currently at, Adrian. And this is a complicated renewal of Mount Rushmore, I think it's fair to say.
That is an unbelievable list, lads. Like that's.
Well, the beautiful thing, unlike the Meath fellas, we're not talking jawlines here. Tommy was talking about wonderful jawlines, and Hector was eulogizing about the beauty of Graham Geraghty's backside. We're above that. We have transcended that.
Listen, George Best, I'm sure, had a lovely arse as well, but he deserves to be up there.
Lads, George Best, a couple of greatest throwaway quips of all time. Man, look, he says I used to go missing quite a bit. Miss UK, Miss Canada, Miss America. He was a boyo,
He was a rogue, wasn't he? Like in terms of the transcendent aspect of things, Conor has been a massive part of this entire debate over the last couple of months. But like when you talk about transcendent characters on the island, they probably don't come any bigger than him.
As a footballer, no. I mean, as a footballer, as Donal has said, I mean, to put for players like Pelé or any of these to talk about Best in the same breath, it shows you where you're at as a player. There was a piece done on him, and it's a great line, and it was fleeting but eternal brilliance of George Best as a footballer. And that's that from that point of view. It's when you read through it, you just see the demise, and you're just saying, what an awful. Yes, the brilliance was there, but it was he played for 11 different clubs. He became a journeyman, which was so sad, and you start, European Cup winner in 1968. I think he was man of the match also. Won the league a couple of times, European Footballer of the Year in 68. Hall of Famer, player of the year. I mean, it's just, obviously me not want to include, that's not wanting to include him, but thinking that somebody else will bring him in. I understand the difficulty I had was he's never been referred to as a down man. He's always been referred to as George Best from Belfast. Geographically, yes, he falls within the parameters of down, so he's a down man.
Listen, the gods have smiled kindly on Conor. Take the gift when it's coming your way. Isn't it amazing, Donald, the like conversation that we're having here about like the almost unfulfilled aspect of him and the tragedy that comes with the association with the name?
Well, I mean, is it or isn't? I mean, I'm a filmmaker by profession, and George Best's story is it's fairy tale stuff, and you've got a tragic ending, but don't remember the ending. Remember the movie. I mean, that's what I would say. And Best made his own decisions. They were different times. In the modern era, it would have been very, very different. But we were fortunate that he came from Belfast, and the airport's named after him. And I just can't get past the fact that Pele bowed down to George Best from Belfast. It's absolutely remarkable. And perhaps the further away we get from Bestie's era, it's not the better he becomes, but the bigger the memory and the longer his shadow, because I don't think his memory will ever fade. He's that big a deal.
Remember me for the football was one of his famous quotes that gets obviously put out quite a bit. So I think we're at our final four here on, and I don't think there's any great rancor about it. I think are we all happy to sign off on those four? Well,
like from a place where all the cards were in the air about 10 minutes ago, everything has kind of come together nicely. I think there was just a wider appreciation. We should probably hear Colin Murray's final pitch. Like, this was supposed to be to persuade one of you guys to change your mind and put George Best in, but I think you've already done that. But let's listen to it anyway. Here's Colin Murray from earlier in the show.
That's really difficult, because part of me wants to say Danny Blanchflower, but I think Richard Dunwoody's probably going to get lost in the whole conversation. 3 times a champion jockey. So I think I will. Oh my God, my heart's racing. Who would have thought a make-believe mountain and Down could do this to me? And again, you see Blanchflower and Jennings. A lot of people put Jennings above Blanchflower. So, oh my goodness, that's really, really difficult. I'm looking at the mountain now. Say McIlroy's there. Say Best is there. Would it be weird to not have Jennings or Blanchflower up there? Not really, because, well, you can't compare apples and oranges, right? Sport. I'll go Richard Dunwoody.
I think that's a serious shout. Yeah. I think your point earlier on about it being a bit of a shootout between Richard Dunwoody and maybe Pete McGrath or Sean O'Neill from the GA side is bang on. I think that it'll come down to small margins between them.
Let's do that, and let's do that. Who would have thought that? Who would have thought Dunwoody would have been the last name on my lips?
There you go. So he actually wanted to put Dunwoody on it, but I think you guys have almost played the game here in a situation where George Best automatically had to become his wildcard and his final pitch that he's actually altered. I actually just wanted to ask you, Donal, about Sean O'Neill, because we didn't get into it with you actually in too much detail earlier on, and obviously he was always going to be on your Mount Rushmore, but I think for every Down GA person he's in consideration, and obviously Conor's the man who put him up here in the first place. Can you sum up what this team in particular means to the people of Down and the GA people of Down?
Well, Tony Hanaho, the great Dublin player, he probably told me one of the great stories about that day in 1960 when Down took Sam Maguire home for the first time over the border. And Hanaho was 9 or 10 years of age. He said he was up in the stand. My father met the Uachtaráin at that time, several years later, and he said to him, he said, Kevin, there were 119,000 in Croke Park that day. We couldn't tell anybody. But Tony Hanaho told me, he said it was like a concert. They were all spilling down onto the pitch. And they were passing bodies down onto the sideline as they fainted. So it was a scene that the GA had never seen before. And speaking to people from that era who remember it, we had the GPA office above Kennedy's pub there near Croke Park. And, they told me in there that when the Down team came in, it was like Man United coming in. They were this flash of colour, something that was new and fresh and exciting, and it just turned a page. And of course, I have no concept of that, only from what people tell me. But, you know, my dad was on that team as well, and it just strikes me that it was one of those moments in time when the sport changed, and that changed the perception of ourselves in County Down. And to this day, when Down get on any type of a run, it doesn't matter who's playing, who's managing them, whatever, they will always put the fear of God into other counties, Kerry in particular. And there's a reason for that, and that's because of 1960. And obviously Sean was one of the key people in that victory.
Yeah, I think we're reaching and have reached consensus. I mean, I know Colin was obviously making a bit of a play there for Richard Dunwoody. Any last changes, lads?
No, I mean, I'm happy with that, and I know Dunwoody is up there, but I still feel, you know, Dermot Lennon got a raw deal. I think when people understand the environment he came from and what he achieved, that you know, they are two phenomenal jockeys who really rode to the top of their game. So, I mean, we need a bigger mountain, lads, or we need the mountains of Mount Rushmore, because there's too many.
To be fair, that comes up every single time, and normally I go, here, but actually you really have a case. It's an incredible list. That's the envy of the entire country, that has caused rancor, debate, fallings out. And that's just between myself and Owen this week.
You have no idea the crap this has caused. In a good way. It's been fantastic. But it has been, honest to God, for 4 days now, it's been horrendous. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning. The first thing I was thinking about this morning was this bloody thing here. It woke me.
Well, Conor, I got a message from one of your old teammates, and he said to me, "Don't let that bollocks put himself up there."
There's many things I would do, but I certainly would. No, Jesus, not at all. I was a water carrier. Them boys were footballers. They had, you know, again, Pete McGrath, Morris Hayes, Kevin Musson, Mickey Linden, James McCartan, DJ, Paddy. Like, there's so many that we could have gone with, absolutely, and that's purely obviously the Gaelic background. Collie brought in all the soccer players that potentially could have gone forward. I think what we've done is
mention Ronan Rafferty either. You know, I mean,
Rafferty wasn't former European number one. I mean, you're talking about Rory McIlroy, the best golfer in the world. Well, just on his day, peerless, absolutely peerless. When he plays well, he wins. Period. When he puts a wee bit better, he wins. Period. That's it. He's won majors by 8 shots. He's done things that nobody else has done.
I was saying earlier on to Colin Murray that Down had achieved very well per capita and stuff like that. It's just pure ignorance on my part. It's the fourth most populous county on the island of Ireland, and 500,000 people there. I thought this was a massive overachievement. It's about the going rate for a county the size of Down having an ability to fill 2 or 3 Mount Rushmores.
Yeah, we're lifted up quite heavily because of Belfast. We're sort of anchored to Belfast, so that bucks us up. You want to drive up here? There's a few villages to drive through. There's not too many people about. But no, look, if you throw in, obviously you're going to put in. Bass goes in. You know, he's revered. Who else have we got? A big Pat.
We've got the final 4 that we've landed on are George Best, Rory McIlroy, Sean O'Neill and Pat Jennings.
Good list, folks.
Incredible.
It's not bad. Big Pat, one of the greatest. Sean O'Neill, one of the greatest, but he represents so many of the greats that are up here.
Well, listen,
in the GAA field.
Conor and Donal, you've done your county a great service, and thanks a million for joining us this morning. It's a bloody good-looking mountain.
The rest of you're in trouble now.
We're all in trouble. It's true.
Beat that.
Thanks, lads. Fair play. Good work.
Thank you.